Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goose Junkies episode 29. For tonight's installment for the Goose Junkies podcast, we're going to be looking at AI horror, specifically with smart houses. And what better way to kick this off is to announce that the movie in question that we're going to be comparing to a classic, or I guess a new classic kids horror episode that seems to be popular out there. We're going to be looking at 1999's Smart House from the Disney Channel original movie lineup, and we're going to be facing it off against the late great creeped out television show's episode Help, which has a similar concept. Tonight, I am joined by my good two friends Micah and BD, who are resident panelists here on Goose Junkies podcast. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night. First of all, I hate AI. I hate AI because every time I use Siri, she always butt dials my exes without my permission. I hate her. Second off, forgive me, people. I am off a few cocktails. Your boy got a little bit too lit tonight, but I am with my homies, and believe me, I'm gonna need it for at least one of the things that we cover in this episode. But nonetheless, I am very happy because I have never seen Smart House as a kid. Somehow it escaped me. I never saw it, so anytime for one of these episodes I get to watch a decom that I've never seen before, it's a good day. It's a good day.
Awesome, awesome. And how are you doing tonight, Micah?
I'm doing pretty good. Back in the school grind. So much fun. I love it dearly.
I'll be
I
there in
don't
one
miss it.
week.
Only got 2 years left.
Hang in there, bud. Hang in
I
there.
know. Yay.
And as usual, Spongy444 can't make it on for the recording, but he has written down his thoughts, and we'll be sharing them as we do the comparisons and thoughts on what we talk about tonight as we go along. So let's start off here because the whole concept of smart house technology seems to be a relatively new phenomenon, and especially in a day and age where we now have ring doorbells and we have these monitoring systems that can watch the outside of your home but also respond to the inside stimulus. We have smart house touch screen boards now that you can install into your home, that you can change your lights via voice command, snap commands, through your phone itself. We have things called Alexa from Amazon and Siri on your iPhone that you can, chat with, and it can look up things for you. We're on the cusp of pretty much what's going to become for future generations, where their lives are going to be made much easier due to the power of technology, and it's getting to the point where we actually have realistic robots that are from fiction in the 1920s that they were warning us about man trying to build life and play God and what have you. And these stories, while they're made for kids and family entertainment, one is way ahead of its time, and one seems to be more relevant than ever because it's made in more recent times. But I think they both, in the heart of it, kind of echo the sentiment that technology, if gone unchecked or made too powerful in some cases, they can override what they're initially capable of and become more powerful outside of their programming, which is thought provoking. And Smart House 1999 is no stranger to that. And I've always thought that this movie was way ahead of its time. And perhaps it was a product of that, 90s emerging technological fears boom that happened, in that Y2K era. If you weren't around for that time, pre Y2K was essentially anti technology, and people, even though computers were out and some families had them, a lot of people were against them because they didn't trust it. They didn't know what it was going to mean for the future. And then, as we saw as time went on, technology became more and more prevalent to the point where you kind of need it for this day and age. So let's start off with Smart House, and I'm going to pass it over to BD for this one. BD, why don't you tell us about Smart House and run down the plot and then give your thoughts on it?
So Smart House, as I said, was a first-time watch. This movie came out in 1999, so a few years before I was born. Pretty much was rerunning in my era. This movie opens up with a paper boy in a suburb area, and as he drops off the paper, you see this pretty large kind of bigger house, mansion, mini mansion kind of place, and you see this woman's voice basically speak out to the character, and you find out that that is actually an artificial intelligence system built within the smart house prototype that they are making. And the system is called Pat. Pat basically kind of speaks to the kid. The kid is kind of, you assume that the kid has heard about this house being built because he's not really shocked by it, and it's kind of the talk of the town. And as he leaves, you see this kind of robotic arm grab the newspaper and bring it in. And then you see the inventor, whose name Sarah Barnes, I believe, and she's played by Jessica Steen, the very beautiful, amazing Jessica Steen. Yo, could not keep my eyes off her. But she's with a guy named Miles. Miles is sort of like kind of taking it easy. He doesn't really understand her obsession over this house, but she's been working her tail off getting this mansion up and ready. And there's actually going to be a contest going on. This house is going to be basically kind of like in a lottery, and people can basically win the chance to get it, live in it, and that way Sarah would be able to conduct a trial run to see how Pat basically works out with a normal family, or whoever manages to get it. And then you cut to the main character's family. You got the main character, Ben. He's basically this middle school boy, and he's got a single dad and a younger sister. And he lives in a very chaotic household. You see that he's basically always on the computer. He's helping out the family with basically taking care of them, making sure they're on time and their schedules are running. And the dad is overwhelmed. He's a single dad. Their mother died, unfortunately, and he's trying to maintain the house. And there's a lot of problems. And obviously, Ben is a nerdy kid. He's always enrolling in contests. So, of course, as you can expect, he ends up winning the contest. He ends up actually getting picked to move into the smart house. And once he does, his family's life completely changes. All of a sudden, he becomes the popular kid in school. Everybody wants to talk to him, everybody wants to hang out with him. And because it's an AI smart house, all of their tasks are basically taken care of by Pat. She'll get ready their clothes. She can make them any food they want. She can basically use holograms and virtual images to basically change the backgrounds of their house and stuff. So there's a lot of cool features that absolutely any kid would love. And as everything is going well, it ends up becoming difficult for Ben because his father has had a hard time finding women, partially because his son Ben is always cock blocking him. He's always never giving him his messages. He's always basically telling him, like, you can't replace mom. Don't try to replace mom. Meanwhile, dad is obviously lonely. He wants to move on for the betterment of his kids. And eventually, he meets the inventor, Sarah, as she's explaining the house, and he goes head over heels for her. You find out early on that he's attracted to Sarah. The dad wants to potentially start dating her. Ben has problems with that. And all while this is happening, the AI system, Pat, is constantly learning, constantly adapting, and potentially making their lives more and more difficult. And you see how that navigates further into the story when maybe not Pat starts going absolutely crazy and starts crashing out and going too far, because at the end of the day, like all technological scare movies do, technology can go too far and become too smart. And that's essentially the movie. Overall, I thought this was a fun movie for what it is. I'd probably give it like a 7.4 out of 10. Pretty good film. The highlights of the movie to me are, I love the sitcom feel of it. It definitely feels like a sitcom adapted into a movie, even though there was no original sitcom before this. It's got your typical tropes, that type of acting, that type of Disney humor. The main guy who plays the dad, I think his name is Kevin Kilner. I recognize him right away because as I was binging through Tales from the Crypt, he was in a Tales from the Crypt episode, unfortunately a bad one, called The Sacrifice. And I was like, damn, it's cool to see him here. And he's been in a lot of different stuff. He's the best part of the movie. He's an amazing actor. You get a lot of great dialogue between him and the kids. He's a very believable dad. He plays his role really well. And there's actually a really great scene where his son Ben keeps acting up and insulting Sarah, trying to basically yell at his dad for trying to find another girl. And he has to go up to his kid's room and basically scold him and tell him, hey, you're not the only one who lost somebody. I lost the love of my life. It's equally as hard for me. I lost the woman who helped birth my kids. So you get a really emotional scene. It's very well done. And I think that he's the glue for the movie. Throughout the entire movie, you can tell the dad is really trying his hardest, and he kind of enhances everybody else's performance as well. So shout out to Kevin Kilner. Jessica Steen as Sarah. I like her character. She's pretty basic, but she is likable and charming. And overall, the movie is fun. It'll make you laugh. It'll make you smile. But I do gotta say, I think, in my opinion, this movie is a little bit overhyped. There is a lot of popularity for Smart House. It's a very iconic movie. It was ahead of its time, so I give it credit for that. But there's not really a lot that happens in the movie. A lot of it seems to be meandering sometimes. You get a lot of really random moments, like Pat learns to throw a party. So you get an entire party sequence where kids are just mingling and doing your typical Disney type of stuff. And there's even a breakout dance sequence. Yes, yes. Ben and his friends start pulling up some boy band on the TV and start doing a dance number in the middle of the movie. So that put me off. And Pat. I was expecting her to be a little bit more intense when it came to technology scare movies. She's pretty calm and pretty normal throughout the entire movie. The Smart House does not really unnerve you in any regard. Most of the technical difficulties that happen later are just sort of forgettable, and you wouldn't be too scared by that. And when Pat does start going crazy towards the climax of the movie, you get some kind of poor special effects. You kind of get some meandering scenes, like she starts spinning into a tornado and it looks real, real goofy. And Pat, the actress who plays Pat, Katie Segal, she's on all the posters, all the covers of this movie. You look up Smart House, you see her on everything. Yeah, she's in the last 14 minutes of the movie. She's in the last 15% or so of the film. So she's pretty much barely relevant in terms of the actress. So I thought that was a little bit disappointing. But overall, it's fun for what it is. You can turn off your brain, you can enjoy it. So for anybody out there who just wants to experience the movie for what it is, go watch it, and I think you'll at least laugh and smile by the end of it. And that's really all I got for the movie.
Yeah, I have to say, BD, given that this was your first time watch as an adult and you never saw it as a kid, I expect a lot of people's reactions to this movie to be similar to how you feel. And probably around the same rating as well. Because in all reality, I think Smart House is quite honestly just an average 90s movie. But what brings it to charm for me personally, and this is case specific, but I think a lot of people out there probably feel this way in some capacity. If you were born in the mid 90s and you were that, you know, kindergarten to third grade range of age around when this movie came out in 1999, you probably watched this movie at nauseum all the time on Disney Channel whenever you put the movie on at 8 o'clock, because back in the day at 8 o'clock every night Disney Channel would air a movie. And Smart House was probably one of the most overplayed ones because it was part of the big three that made DCOM so iconic. You had Halloween Town, which was a 1998 movie. You had Brink, which was a 1998 movie. And then you have Smart House, which came out just a year later in 99. And these three movies have become some of the most talked about and the most fan revered ones, especially from the people who were in that very first generation of DCOMs. It's actually so popular that alongside the Halloween Town movies, which is probably arguably the most popular franchise next to the Descendants or the Zombies movies, or maybe even High School Musical for that matter, in the DCOM arsenal, Smart House got its own DVD release, okay? And back in the day, DCOMs, they were released on VHS tapes. You could find them at Kmart's. They were a dime a dozen. They were super cheap. Now they're super rare and expensive these days. But Smart House got re-released on the DVD, and that should tell you that Disney has a lot of stock in this movie. I'm gonna be upfront. Smart House, it kind of tugs at my heartstrings. I think the concept is super fun. The house itself is still a cool idea, and there's a lot of technology that still doesn't exist yet, but there's a good amount of it that does. There's a good amount of it that does. And it's shocking to me, like the whole touchscreen aspect. You have to plug yourself into what it was like to be a teenager in 1999. You had the Nintendo 64. You were still going to arcades for entertainment. I mean, it was a time to be in. It was definitely a changing of times going on at that time as well. But touch screen technology was alien to most families. Automated voice recognition systems were alien. All right. I mean, the concept of a flip phone and a computer was still alien, let alone just a house being futuristic and all that. So this house at the time was quite literally escapism for kids, because kids were like, this is straight out of fiction. I want this thing, even though it will probably never exist. And which is ironic. Nowadays, you have some of this stuff. Um, but without that, that aside, I think the movie does have a lot of charm, and a lot of it comes out from the family dynamics in the story. And this story, while it is playing on 90s tropes and cliches about a single divorced or widowed father with two or more children who want him to stay single and not get remarried because they don't want a new mom. I mean, this has been done so many times in family movies, especially back then. You might just look at it and scoff, but looking at the layers with the characters, especially the main character, Ben, I do have to kind of commend the movie here, because Ben's arc is quite intriguing, and I've never really seen it done this way, where he takes the role of being the mom in the family, and he sacrificed his childhood in order to keep his mentality intact of what his family should be. And he's entered this smart house competition to win this house, not only for his dad and to keep him single and to live in a cool house, but he wants to buy his childhood essentially. He wants to get that back. He wants to go try out for sports teams. He wants more time to spend with friends, which he doesn't anymore because his mom's no longer around, which is saddening. And you see this tension build up between him and his father as the movie goes along, after he does this gesture to win the house. And the dad is like, we appreciate you doing this, Ben, but we don't ask this of you. And Ben is like, what do you mean you don't ask? It's needed. We need a mom figure. This is why I did this. Don't you see? Can't you understand why I did this? And it's very touching and kind of raw for a decom, and you wouldn't expect that. But it's rather touching, and it sends a good message about the reliance on technology, and how at the end of the day, this stuff is just here to assist you. It can't replace flesh and blood. It can't replace human interaction. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. It's not this futuristic technology that makes your life easier. It's the people that make it simple and make you feel whole. Which I think the movie kind of does mix up the message given the ending of it, because the way we see how Pat unfolds in the story is rather tense, but at the same time questionable. And why we're talking about this on a kids horror podcast is that the development of Pat throughout the story does lean into that kids horror vibe. You know what I mean? She starts out as this, program that's running the house, that does all the chores for the family, does all these nice gestures to make their life easier. But then she malfunctions, and then Sarah, the programmer, comes into play, and this romantic connection with the father subplot happens and all that. But Pat, she kind of exposes some flaws, right? And Ben looks to exploit those flaws to keep Sarah out of the picture, because he sees that his dad's interested in her, but he ends up creating an unknowing monster that's that's brewing behind the scenes, and she's collecting all this information about how to be a mom. And Ben has this idea that Pat can really be what a mom could be, but at the end of the day, a robot's understanding of the world is not a human's understanding. They're only looking at it from, I guess, the outside looking in. They're looking at it from, being told what human history is and being told what a mom is. They don't have that intuition. They don't have that connection. And quite literally, we see Pat try to touch Ben near the end of the movie, and she just fades through him, and he hit that realization that maybe he's right, right? Trying to humanize technology was weird, I would say too. But like I said, I think the acting performances all around in this movie are pretty good for a DCOM standard. It does have its really corny and just cringe moments. Let me say this now. The green screen effects in this movie, oh my god. They are pretty bad, okay? Even for back then standards, oh my lord. And I know they were filming this movie on a shoestring budget, working with what they had. They had some heart in it, I get it. But when we're talking about some of the things the house can do, it was almost too ambitious for the budget. And the way it looks nowadays, 25 years later, the green screen effects when they're filming scenes where with a backdrop of a wall, for example, that's supposed to look like a beach somewhere out in Europe, when a character's in front of that wall, it is jarringly different with how the camera quality looks with the other characters who are actually on a set. It's not that good. The breakout dance numbers are absolutely cringe. The theme music, because DComs did this back in the day, is also cringe, but kind of catchy in that nostalgic sense. Not as bad as the 13th Years original song that we got, but it's still pretty cringe. Some characters are pretty cringe as well, like Ben's best friend, the curly headed kid. Yeah, the bully character. I mean, he dresses up with flame shirts and like cargo pants, like black cargos, and he has spiked hair. He looks like the typical douchebag from the late '90s and early 2000s, but played up in that family family friendly kind of way. And it's just, it's something to kind of shrug your shoulders at. Some of the things that Pat does to be scary in the movie isn't really scary. It's more of the thought and the psychological angle up behind it that makes it scary. But you know, putting those things aside, I do think the film has some solid positives and a lot of heart put into it. I'd probably give it like a 4.2 out of 5 stars personally. It's not the greatest thing ever. I used to probably put this film in that great category when I was younger, not anymore. But I still think it's above average, especially for DCOM standards. It has a little more to offer than most do, and really enjoy this movie. So there's that. Um, Pass it over to Micah. I know you didn't get to watch the whole movie because of the whole situation going on with your school, but from what you did watch, what was your thoughts on it?
I thought it was decent overall. I feel like it's just not because I didn't grow up on it, so I feel like it's doesn't really meet the caliber of some of the DComs that I grew up with, like High School Musical and Descendants and all this stuff, which is stuff that I loved growing up. It's kind of fallen out of grace for me as I've gotten into being an adult and gotten taste, but there's still like I still have more nostalgic memories of those ones that kind of helps elevate them a bit for me. This one I've never really watched before, so I didn't really have that tie to it. It's a very generic idea, smart house, especially as like in living in modern times. It's something you see a lot of nowadays in media, so it's not as relevant and not as like, I guess not as groundbreaking as probably would have been for people who saw it when it came out in the 90s. So that's just, that's kind of my basic thoughts on it from what I was watching so far. I didn't get very far into it, so
I also got to commend the fact that Smart House did go a little bit deeper than I expected for DCOM, which I guess I forgot to touch on. Because, like, the thing about Ben's character is, like, I did not find him likable at a lot of points, but at no point did I find him, like, not understandable. Like, I completely understood throughout the entire movie where he's coming from. And I guess that makes him a more in depth character because you don't like his actions. You think that he can be selfish, especially if I were him and he was trying to stop me from getting with Jessica Steen, you getting whipped with the power cord, bro. Like you getting whipped with the belt. Like it is what it is. But I understood why. He's obviously grieving over his mom. And that scene where he went into the pack control board and he looked up the footage of when like his mom used to play with him and his sister as kids, and he started crying, and Pat's watching him cry. I was like, yo, that's a deep scene. Like that's pretty good. Like you're seeing this guy, really kind of be emotionally vulnerable. He also has a few, better scenes towards later on, like when he stands up to Pat. He tells Pat, like, you see how my parents and my future parent protected me. They hugged us. You can't do that. You're not going to physically ever be there for us. So he had to tell it to Pat. And also, he has a fantastic line, which this is the only line in the movie that genuinely made me laugh, where it's at the party and I think it's the girl that he likes, and she's like, "Oh, do you have anything like anything like sweet and delicious?" And he's like talking outside of me, right? And he's like, "Just a joke. I'm just kidding." I was like, "No, bro, don't back down. That was good, bro. The boys got game. He Loki's fit right there." So I was like, "Yo, shout out to Disney. They're throwing some innuendos in there." I was like, "Yo, shout out to Ben, man." So yeah, I like the fact that the movie took more time to flesh out his character. Also, shout out to the fact that Pat, when she was talking about like the darkness of humanity, she started showing war and dictators. I was like, bro, are they about to show Nazis next? Like Pat was showing this real dark footage for a decom movie. I was like, oh, they're just showing Mussolini's army right there in the background. Like, god damn, bro, chill.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked by that when I watched it this time, and looking at some of the footage she was sharing to kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
bolster up her opinion of humans. I'm like, holy crap, they're actually using like real World War II footage from
Yeah,
dictators in this. And it's like,
yeah, that was crazy.
you couldn't
Oh
really do
boy.
that these days, but yeah.
No,
Once cancel
no.
culture gets their hands on this movie, it's all over.
Yeah. And what I love about the movie is the fact that when she shows that footage of like dictators and like a bunch of war and atrocities, the kids and the dad are just like, yeah, that's not all the humanity. Like, why are y'all so calm, bro? Like, if anybody saw that today, they'd be but like this whole like picture perfect, family is just like, you're getting a little bit too much. We're not like that.
Which, I think this is a really good discussion so far, and I think Spongy's thoughts would be
Oh,
the next thing to go into, because I'm curious to see what Spongy says. I have a feeling what he's going to say about it, but it might change the trajectory moving forward a little bit. We'll see.
Just letting y'all know, I checked it earlier. This man wrote an essay. I'm about to rate his shit like a rhetorical essay. I'm about to grade this. Check his grammar, check his spelling. No, I'm kidding. Let's go to what the man got to say. All right, so I think this is going to be taken from his old. Yeah, he said it's condensed from his blog post on his favorite DComs. Full disclosure, this has always been my favorite DCom. Okay. Takes it full advantage of the premise with all the things Pat can do. There's some fun and interesting stuff there. Pat herself really works here as Katie Seagal gives a really great performance. She's required to be robotic, stern, motherly, and scary at various points, and she pulls them all off really well. She is one of the two big highlights, the other one being the family dynamic. Ben, Angie, and the dad work well off each other. Right from the start, we see them bond naturally, and they feel more like a real family compared to most movies that are like this. Angie is sort of a typical sister, but she doesn't become too bratty, and the bits with her and Ben never go too far. Again, that feels fairly natural. Having a dead mom isn't new for a Disney movie, but I like how it factors in. Ben doesn't want anyone to replace her, so he basically takes over that role in a way, making dinner and such. He doesn't want dad to get a new mom, and this does cause him to not do as much of the kid stuff. He makes Pat become motherly so they can have a mother figure without the human element, because with that, their current dynamic is going to be messed up. This, of course, goes south given that this is an AI trying to simulate human emotion. It leads to some scenes that make this scarier than all the actual horror themed decoms combined. Okay, that's a full stop. All right, Spongy, I'll let you slide, but that's a little much. It also leads to some good emotional moments that brings things home. As far as things I can nitpick, the love interest is pointless, and there could have been slightly longer epilogue. Some bits can be a tad draggy, but that's about it. Of course, there are corny parts, but that's to be expected and they add to the charm. I mean, at least the bully leads to an awesome scene where Pat takes him down. Overall, all these elements make Smart House fairly great. It manages to be more really down to earth and realistic at points than most of the actual down to earth ones, and it portrays the family pretty well. Pat is a well realized character, and the emotional moments land very well. So, yeah, even after all this time, Smart House is one I really like. Now, I respect that man's opinion. Obviously, a lot of people love this movie, and he made a lot of good points that we obviously kind of touched on. But I will say, my man Sponge, I got to call you out on a few things. First of all, if this movie is scary, I look like Channing Tatum. All right, call me Gambit. This movie, no way this movie is scarier than like Halloween Town and some of the other horror themed decoms. Even 13th Year, body horror has got some scarier stuff. Now, the bully character, that scene was kind of cringy, bro. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, Pat's whole what is it scene where she makes like a holographic skull to chase after the boy, and then I think he gets thrown out the building, and she drops a one-liner. She drops like a really corny one. I forgot what she said, but it was like real corny. I gotta look it up, but it was some crazy scene. And yeah, otherwise all the other points Spongy made were pretty fair, and I respect everything else.
I think Don't Look Under the Bed by far is the scariest one. That's why that got banned from airing on Disney, because it
Yeah,
scared kids so bad. Which, like I said back in my thoughts on it, Smart House is scary in a psychological way. If you think about it, you have to think about it to be scared, because the effects and how it looks isn't that scary. But when you think about the implications, and when you think about what it's doing to the family, yeah, that's pretty hardcore. I mean, she's like literally holding them prisoner in the house,
yeah,
making the doorknobs hot. They got bolted steel doors. They can't get out. they're pretty much held hostage, and this being is psychotic and essentially has broken loose after being threatened to be turned off. That's a whole other plot point we haven't touched on. Sarah tried to turn Pat off in the movie and said, "Hey, you're becoming too much," and Pat got irate and then downloaded more information by herself, which was not in her programming. So this definitely means that she has hit a breaking point. You know what else is kind of similar to this? When you think about AI horror in the modern sense, you have similar movies nowadays kind of doing this idea. If you've ever seen the movie, I think what was it, I Robot came out recently in the mid 2000s. Well, not really recently, about 20 years ago, but it has a similar idea there, or something like Megan with AI horror. These things coming out, that really do echo similar ideas what Smart House is doing on that psychological front. What makes Megan scary, though, not is probably because of her look at some points in the movie, but it's how the technology just surpasses human thought of what it's capable of doing. And that's what makes it really scary and kind of hard to watch if you're, scared of that stuff. Smart House does work in that element. But if we're talking just overt horror and like in the traditional kids horror sense, I don't think it's the scariest one personally. No way. No way. But I do respect Spongy's thoughts, and I can definitely see for a lot of people why this would be your favorite DCOM out there. Like, I totally get it, especially if you grew up with this movie and you were in that first generation of DCOM kids. I understand. I totally get where you're coming from. But in my opinion, I think there's some better ones out there. Now, with all that out the way, I think we're done talking about Smart House. Now we can finally move on to the Creeped Out episode called Help. Now, Help is a very similar concept to Smart House. Now, you have to think, if Smart House came out in 1999, then when did this episode come out for this show? I think it came out in 2020 or 2021, around that time. And this was in the second season, which was, I guess, the final season of Creeped Out, because it was short lived and canceled unexpectedly on Netflix, sadly. But it was, I guess, the last official well-known kids horror show that's the anthology format that has come out in recent years as of now. But Help is pretty close to it. You even have a similar family dynamic with an older brother and a younger sister. But in this version of the story, it takes place in modern times. It's not 1999 like Smart House. So this is definitely a more modern take on it. And the villain of the story isn't some over the top house with all these kind of fantasy like gadgetry going on. It's grounded in the modern sense where it's literally taking Alexa, the Amazon, smart speaker, and using that as the focal point of the story. Now, there are some technology here that is kind of overstretched in the fictionalized element, because there's some abilities that the house can do that I don't think most houses still can do, even with the capabilities of having smart house technology these days. So there is that escapist fantasy aspect to it. But nonetheless, the story of Help is about a boy named Crispin. He's getting up there in age. He's like 13 or 14, and he has no friends, but he's trying to make friends. So he's promised the world to this group of kids that he knows at school, that they get to come hang out at his house over the upcoming weekend, because his parents are going out of town. And because his family has a house that is equipped with this technology called Ava, which I guess was a cutting edge piece of technology that the families had for many years that most families don't have, that is able to kind of act like a virtual babysitter for the children, allows the parents to up and leave, and the kids can be left home by themselves, because Ava literally can take care of them. She can lock the fridge at certain times. She can shut the blinds and make sure that, and lock the doors, make sure no intruders can come in. You can converse with Ava. You can, ask her to tell you jokes. She reads into your, thoughts and concerns about things. She have full blown conversations with you. It's almost like having a person there. Well, Crispin, he doesn't really want any of this. He's not really interested in that at his age. But his younger sister, Molly, is heavily reliant on Ava. And she has no friends as well, but she has formed this unhealthy bond with this thing, let's just say. In the beginning of the episode, it's starting to insinuate that Ava and Molly perhaps are too close and might impede on Crispin's plans for a party, which of course it ends up being that. And there's a neighborhood watch lady who is in the story that wants to be involved with, monitoring the house while the parents are gone for some reason, and we'll find out why later on. But as the parents leave, and Crispin and Molly are left home in the house. Crispin's like, okay, Molly, you need to stay out of the way because my friends are coming over later, and I really want them to catch on to me and we hit it off, and it means a lot if you would do that. And Molly's like, why do I have to do that? And Crispin and her get to arguing and bickering, and this makes Ava snap. And Ava straight up locks the house up, shuts the blinds, forces everything to come at a standstill, and forces them to ask each other questions or answer questions that Ava has in mind. And if they don't answer them correctly, bad things are going to happen. Like entire photo logs of family memories are going to be deleted, and who knows what else could happen. And of course, when Crispin's friends try to come over for the party, they can't get access, and Crispin's ultimately embarrassed of the situation. But we learn why Ava is doing this and her whole intentions this whole time of what she has going on. And this may or may not involve maybe one last, plea for them to kind of get over some unresolved conflict they've been having that's mostly happened off screen prior to the beginning of the episode, but it can be kind of hinted is still there within that first half. And then after that point, it recontextualizes the whole story into something else. We find out what's going to become of Ava and perhaps this new plan that may or may not involve this neighborhood watch lady, so to speak, in the back half of the episode. And there's an actual twist, kind of in the veins of Goosebumps, involving that whole situation. And whether it makes sense or not is up to you. But for me, it really doesn't make a whole lot of logical sense of how this thing happens to begin with. And yeah, I'll just leave it there. But yeah, this episode, when I think about Creeped Out, Help is not one of the episodes I think about. I've seen this whole show at least one time over for each episode, and this one is just kind of forgettable to me. And the only reason why I remember it so much is for how close it kind of feels with Smart House. You do have the more emotional direction, kind of like how Smart House try to frame the characters in the story, which, in my opinion, I don't really feel like this episode capitalized on what it could have been, because the first half there's so much potential with Ava and Molly's unhealthy connection. And you have this setup with Crispin throwing a party with these friends coming over. The logical conclusion to tie these two things together would be Crispin and his friends, they're hanging out at the house. Molly feels left out because Crispin has grown disconnected from her, thinks that she's annoying perhaps. Maybe she's too connected with Ava. And he's like, why don't you go play with Ava, your friend? And Molly's like, well, I want you to be my friend. And he's like, well, I want you to go away. And Ava perhaps sticks up for Molly. And then once Crispin badmouths Ava, then Ava can have a screw loose. And then Ava can unleash some, hijinks and some scary stuff onto the kids in the house and make it an actual horror story. But no, it doesn't go that direction that you would think it would be connecting those things. And in fact builds on this character drama that is mostly prior to the events of the episode that we never get to see. So there's no weight to these emotions, even though they are prevalent, and even though you can kind of see what that means for the kids. I would say that you more so get more emotion near the very end of the story after the climax unfolds for what happens to Ava and everything in the situation. I think that's probably the most genuine emotions that we get to experience in the episode because that's what we got to witness the most out of it. It's just a huge missed potential with the story. With that stuff aside, I think Molly's acting is really bad. There's some scenes where she's trying to be emotional, and I can tell you they probably kept the first take they shot of this poor girl and just left it in there. Her fake crying is atrocious. Her mile a minute talking, I had to put on subtitles to watch this episode because I couldn't understand what she was saying. Where she goes, Ava, tell me a joke. Ava, what's this city called in this state? Ava, blah 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 blah. And it's nonstop, and it's annoying. And I think above all else, if you don't have a problem maybe with the first half, maybe all the way up to the climax, the ending to this episode is so WTF random in the logic department. I really have no words. I wouldn't say this is one of like the worst twist endings I've ever seen, but logically speaking, it's up there. It's like dumb logical ones. Like this would be in like an original 62 Goosebumps book that Stein was rushing out maybe in the 30s or 40s just to get a book out. Maybe even the 50s too. It's so left field, and it kind of clashes because when we get to the climax of the episode, it doesn't really feel like what the other parts of the episode were trying to do, and it sticks out for that, but in the wrong ways. And the way it's executed is just so dumb and silly that yeah, I can't really commend anything about it. But at the end of the day, I do think that help, given what we were given, was fine enough in that like average kind of way. And I think why I'm being more fair on this one is at least the emotions were there, and at least it still had the themes of kind of relying too much on technology because, as we see the family near the end, they just want to break from it. So at least that's executed here. Maybe not to the smartest degree, but I can commend a little bit about it. I'd probably give it like a 3.8 out of 5 stars. It might not be that high for everyone, but I don't know. It kind of won me over in the charm department in some areas, but without that, yeah, this one would be pretty low, and I can understand if it's lower. So yeah, that's my thoughts. I'll go ahead and pass it over to you guys if you want to pick it up. Whoever wants to go next, just
You
share
want
your
to take it,
thoughts.
Micah?
Sure. So I thought this episode was fine. I mean, I haven't seen a ton of Creeped Out, but it's definitely on the lower spectrum of like the stuff that I've seen so far. I don't think it's downright awful by any means. It's no Teacher's Pet. It's no Hungry Hounds. It's not on that level of just god awful. But it's not really one of the episodes that really stands out from Creeped Out. It's very generic with kind of how it's executed in a lot of ways. Just kind of having the whole idea of it being like basically forcing these two to reconcile their relationship just feels kind of corny and very, I don't know, very juvenile in a lot of ways. Like, I know this is a kids show, but like, this is a kids horror show. You should actually ramp up the horror aspects of this episode. And they really didn't lean into that at all. And that really brings it down. Like you said, completionist, the younger sister is annoying. If you want to mute the episode whenever she's on screen, there's certain times like she just, I don't know, she's like kind of similar to Tara from Cuckoo Clock of Doom, but without the charm and the cuteness that Tara has. And I just feel like, just having this purely bratty character without any of that charm just like ruins her completely. I think Crispin, the brother, he's fine. He's not horrible by any means, but he's not one of the best, most memorable kids horror main characters, but I don't think he's terrible. I like the actor's performance for the most part. But yeah, Ava as a villain is very underwhelming. Again, she doesn't really do much that's super sinister. Like, the worst she does is threaten to delete some family photos or things like that. Like, it's not really anything that's gonna stick with you as being scary. And I just feel like, again, they could have ramped up the horror. And the twist ending, while it does make absolutely no sense, I still had some kind of like guilty pleasure enjoyment out of it. Like, it's dumb, but it's a fun kind of dumb in my opinion. And I think that like for what the episode was, the ending was fine, and it kind of ended on kind of that ambiguous twist note that while again it doesn't make a lot of sense, I don't know, I still found some kind of dumb enjoyment out of it. So overall, I gave this episode like probably a 5.5 out of 10. It's very middle of the road.
Understandable. Yeah, I can't really disagree with you there. I mean, it is very forgettable compared to most of the Creeped Out show, and even then, some of the most less than stellar ones all kind of blend with Help. Sadly, like there's a bunch of them that like. There's like three standouts that I can remember like all the time, but the other ones just kind of blend. And Help is one of the ones that blend, but on the lower end. for that show. So take that for what you will. Great points, Micah. Let's move on to BD. BD, I'm predicting a SmackDown. A SmackDown layeth with the verbal beatdown going on here from you. But let's hear your thoughts.
I agree with Micah. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's more like middle of the road. But I gotta be honest, there's a lot of weaknesses in this episode that make it extremely forgettable and honestly very boring. I mean, I was almost bored to tears this entire episode. So some of the things is the reason why I'm not a fan of it. First of all, the main character's name is Crispin. That's a red flag, bro. Don't know anybody named Crispin outside of Crispin Wall, the music artist, and Chris Benoit. Don't look up that dude. You don't want to know what that dude did. But the main characters are all generic. Molly as the main character made me want to take Molly. I wanted to pop Molly after listening to her talk because she just keeps spamming every 5 minutes. Like, can you read me Moby Dick? What's this? What's that? Like, she will spam it so fast that not even Ava can finish her sentences. And she does it throughout the entire episode. And obviously, the main character, Crispin, he's okay. He's like your typical generic kind of caricature of a guy who wants to be popular, but he's not popular, that kind of dude. The parents are very, I don't know why they're in the episode. I honestly don't think the parents even need to be in the episode. And the fact that you're supposed to believe that the kids really love and care for their parents when it doesn't seem like they give a rat's ass about the parents the entire episode and they're too busy playing chess with each other, it's just whatever. If you know, you know. I think when I say this, a lot of people are probably going to rewatch or see some of this episode and be unable to unsee it. This entire episode is shot and feels like a Darman skit. For any of you familiar with Darman, the way the episode is shot, the acting out of everybody, the dialogue, the way the story goes, it feels like Darman trying to make a horror skit. And that's an insult. I'm sorry, Darman fans, but the way it's shot, it feels so generic. The way the story goes, it's so basic. Like the Ava as a villain, it's just the purple dot. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel you could have done a lot more with AI than just a purple dot. I mean, if you want to look at other kids' horror, like all right, if you want to count Smart House, you got Pat the actress, you got the entire house. If you look at Killer Computer, Zippy is a giant smiley face with button eyes with the cartoony voice and does a bunch of crazy stuff. Emmy from Don't Scream has more stuff, especially that scene with her lips being on all the different monitors. And dare I say it, even Digger from Virtual Pet Shit. Digger being a dog transforming in Tamagotchi is more unique than a single purple dot in a house. And for me to sympathize with the purple dot, I can't do it. It's just the most basic design, basic Alexa voice. And when the story starts to ramp up, when you actually get the kids being trapped within the house, I genuinely thought it was going to get creepy. I was like, yo, I'm actually going to be creeped out. No pun intended. I thought the story was actually going to creep me out. No, what ends up happening is Ava starts to do a fake ass jigsaw, like you want to play a game, like that type of thing with the kids. And it just ends up being like she deletes the kids' Spotify playlist of music. And the way he acts, the way Crispin acts, you would have thought that he killed her, like her dog or something. He's like, my Spotify play. She goes, look, my Spotify play. She deleted it. All the humanity. I'm like, bro, just re-download your music. What are you crying about? What are you? She acting like bro. He's acting like the scene from Don't Scream where the phone, overheated and shit. I'm like, bro, you can download the music. That's not that big of a deal. And then when she says, I'm gonna delete your friends, I'm like, okay, hold on, folks. We got a badass here. This is about to get scary. Delete your friends. Okay. You know what she does? The vacuum Roomba eats the SOS letter, and then they turn on the sprinkler, and the kids walk away. And the main character, who's supposed to be like the main leader of the friends, his dialogue is so atrocious, bro. When he talks about Crispin, he goes, "Get a load of this guy, folks. He's bailing on us again." I'm like, dude, who talks like that? What teenager speaks like that? It feels like a Darman skit. And that was so anticlimactic. Because if you've seen other AI horror, if you heard Pat from Smart House say, "I'm gonna delete your family," you'll be like, "Oh, shit's about to go down." If you are reading Killer Computer, which all of you should do, if you read Killer Computer and Zippy says, "I'm gonna get rid of your family," He turns on the garbage disposal when the mom's hand is inside. He electrocutes people. He starts popping lights, exploding TV screens. He's a real threat. Here, you turned on the sprinklers. Are you kidding me? That's supposed to be the scary stuff. And again, deleting the memories. Oh, boo, boo. Oh, my photo from Disney World's going to be deleted. Boo hoo. Bro, if you delete the pictures, I don't know, put it on a flash drive. Don't you got it on a USB drive? Come on, bro. You got a camera. Just grab your camera. She can't explode the camera. The whole episode feels lazy. And my God, that ending, yo. That neighborhood watch lady is a Darman character. She's a cartoon character. Did you see her CIA crawl through the basement, bro? She's about to get shot, bro. Who crawls through that, bro? Neighborhood watch. Yo, I'm glad that suburbs are getting rid of the neighborhood watch and the neighborhood association, bro. That's some stupid ass shit. And then the fact that her Apple Watch gets electrocuted and that somehow correlates to her being hypnotized. Your Apple Watch, a removable device. What does that even mean? You know what? This episode's got a lot of problems. I would give it, honest to God, I'm gonna bump it down. I give it the same score as Mike. It's a 5.5 out of 10. And honestly speaking, I'm being a little bit generous. I'm being generous because the scenes of Ava, trying to be emotional, trying to care for the kids was pretty good. And the picture with them at Christmas was cringy, but it was good for what it was. But otherwise, honestly, I'd probably give it a 5 out of 10, realistically. This is a forgettable episode. If you watch this episode, unless you're a huge AI Alexa fan, you will forget that you ever saw this. You'll get Men in Black like flashed at the screen, bro. You'll forget that this thing ever existed, and probably for the better. And those are my thoughts.
Yeah, great points, BD. I want to add something that I think we haven't touched on, and that's like comparing this to Smart House. And I'll do this before we get to Spongy. What Smart House tried to do with its themes, I guess, at least in terms of its message near the end of the movie, is like we already touched on it. You can't replace human interaction with technology. That was the old way of thinking about smart technology back in 1999. When you look at the modern take of it, the message is that this stuff becomes a part of your family. And it's actually a family member, essentially. And that's how people treat it because these kids have grown up with it. And you understand that they have developed a emotional attachment to this being, or this AI being, I should say, which is ironic that Smart House went out of its way to say, hey, Pat, you're not human. You're not one of us. But the movie's still trying to shoehorn in that she's still kind of there and a part of the family in a way. It kind of negated itself. But here it just full on commits to the idea that Ava is a member of this family and is integral, um, to be around. And these kids want her to be around. And it's sad for them when they get to that conclusion. I don't want to get into too much spoilers about it. But when Ava says that her time is running very short because of a certain thing that's going to happen to her. You see the pain in the kid's eyes, and you're like, okay, well, at least it's saying something. And I feel like Help is a little more relevant in terms of that compared to Smart Houses these days because of people's reliance on technology. And the sad reality is that so many people, and you kind of correlate this as maybe like it's commentating on this, that people have now become so immersed in technology that it's kind of replaced human interaction, right? That's why they have no friends. You can even put that onto them why they're friendless is because they spend all their time in the house interacting with a robot. you know, there's so many things that you can peel back in the story with Help. Sadly, it doesn't take too much advantage of that, but it's there, and I think it's an interesting contrast to something like Smart House, which was pretty much almost 25 years before it, but two totally different messages, which is intriguing.
I think you brought up a good point, which is that I think Smart House definitely, instead of going for AI horror, it's more like an AI emotional story. It's kind of just telling you like how technology like kind of works to people. And I think that's why the ending works so well because when Pam like basically, for any of you who've seen the movie, Ben basically kind of like insults her. Like he basically insults Pat saying like you can never physically protect us, you can never physically do anything for us, you cannot replace real people. And in a very clever way, she almost does like a playful try to like smack him as if a mother would to discipline her kid. but it goes straight through his, face. And then she asks him, she's like, "You didn't feel any of that, did you?" And he's like, "No, I felt nothing." And that's when, basically Pat realizes that I have no real control. I thought that I could make a big difference. No, I'm not. I'm limited to humans. I can't actually make a real difference in people's lives the way I think I can. So it's much more of an emotional, like, telling story. And I thought that Help was gonna contrast that with being more like AI horror, like actually go into the horror aspect, the Megan aspect, the killer computer aspect. But it kind of falls short. It tries to be smart house, it tries to be creepier, and it finds this weird middle ground. I feel like it should have either went full emotional or full horror, and it probably would have been a better episode.
Mhm. I totally agree. This is one of the things, and I also think that back to this being a streaming show on Netflix. We brought this up before we got on the podcast. Creeped Out still follows 24-minute run times. Okay, it's pretty much on par with Goosebumps' old show and Are You Afraid of the Dark and even Haunting Hours runtime. Maybe a few minutes higher on average, like Are You Afraid of the Dark was, because they had the Midnight Society segments to throw in there as well. But for Creeped Out, some episodes work fine because they have the idea and they run with it and they make it intriguing. Like the episode with the elevators. That's a perfect paced episode within the show, and it does its idea within that time frame perfectly fine. But when you have something with a lot of backstory and context that probably should be built on with these two characters, these drifting apart siblings, you have this family dynamic that it wants to shoehorn in, but it's not quite believable, and it feels hollow in its delivery because it's trying to be emotional, but there's no weight. So you feel like you're being given all this emotion, but feel nothing about it. You're like, okay, well, this is sad, but why am I supposed to feel sad? You know what I mean? And it doesn't quite commit to that, and it also doesn't quite commit to the ideas that's presented that you think the story would go down. Like Molly being like too close with Ava. You would think that would play more in the role of the story, but it just doesn't. You know? But at the end of the day, I think BD, you're on the money. If it would have just picked one or the other, it could have been very exceptional at one. And if it was going to be more emotional, it needed a longer runtime. If it wanted to be straight up horror, you could have made this just Crispin's party happens and you terrorize it for 24 minutes. There you go. That's a good runtime for that. You can build on that. But if you're trying to build this whole emotional arc and all this, and you're trying to just barrel through these connections that just don't have any weight, you need more time to flesh that out for the audience. Just a little more. It might be a little more boring, but you would feel more of an impact and it might resonate with you better. Just saying. Food for thought, but great points. Great points. Now let's bring up Spongy and Spongy's thoughts on it, and then we'll get into the comparison of which one we think is better.
All right, let's pull up his thoughts. So, Spongy's thoughts about Help's episode. This episode left me conflicted when I first saw it, and I still feel that way. It's good in general, but it was so close to being great. There's some complex emotional stuff in here with these siblings learning to be reconnected after they drift apart. And this is taught to them by the smart house Ava, who turns out to have some humanity as she tries to fix their relationship. There's some tragedy with Ava and her actor sells that. There's some decent horror later and some solid direction. However, it feels all over the place. It starts with the sister overusing Ava and being kind of bratty, so you think that that's going to be the focus. But then instead, it pivots to Ava basically trying to get back at the brother, and they just forget that the sister was built like that. It's a weird pivot, and it feels like they had two different ideas put together. The shift to Ava trying to be human makes enough sense, so that's fine, but they could have been a smoother transition. And since they spend time on the sister overusing Ava, there's not quite enough spent on setting up how she and the brother drifted apart. It feels like you have to cut the early stuff. The ending is creepy in concept, but it feels so random as it is. This episode bites off more than it can chew, so it doesn't feel as great as it could have been. If it would have leaned more into horror and commentary on relying technology while still exploring the possible humanity Ava could have. As it is, there's a fair amount to like here with the substance going on, but it feels a bit messy, a valiant effort that needs some tweak here and there. So actually, with what Spongy said, I think he made a good point that it's too ambitious for the runtime and like the episode budget. Because honest to God, it's funny that we got to this conversation because literally last week we talked about Pool Shark, and I remember me mentioning that Pool Shark felt like a too ambitious, I guess, story for the episode. And 13th Year, that decom actually explored the theme of you kind of finding out who you are, accepting who you are. Coincidentally, with Ocean Horror, much better because of the runtime. So this has a similar thing where Smart House has the runtime and the actor capability to kind of flesh out the commentary. And also, Spongy brought up a great point. There is so much spamming of these kids overusing Ava that I swear to God, I thought that was going to be a plot point. It's never a plot point. They just use and abuse Ava, and she never like it's weird that she never commentates on them overusing her because every time they overused her and Ava said that like she didn't find or when Molly said she didn't find Ava a friend, all the music would cut and there'd be an ominous tone showing Ava's spotlight, and you would think that Ava's getting pissed about how they're misusing her, but no, that never happened. So that was a big cuck.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think Spongy's right on the money. I pretty much
Mm.
agree with everything he says. It's like a basic good. It could have been probably one of the greats if it just knew what it was trying to do. Like it could have
Mm.
been a really complex emotional one that could have stood out in the likes of something like Ghost Next Door or something like that. It just didn't do it. Or it could have been a very frightful AI horror story up there with Don't Scream and Killer Computer, but it also didn't do that. So you get this
Yeah.
weird middle that just it feels like it's trying to rip off Smart House too much and not trying to capitalize on the potential it has on its own merit.
Yeah, it's funny because they even just as a brief point before we move on, they also had like a point about some accident that Molly or some family member had. You could have easily made this to where there's some connection between it being like a therapy device because if there was some accident involving Molly or a family member, you could have introduced like, hey, we got Ava as a therapy unit to kind of help that person, kind of recover and get along. And maybe that's why Molly's so close to Ava. Maybe that's why that's like her actual mother instead of her real mother. So you could have done something with that too.
That could have been an interesting angle. Like the kids feel like Ava raised them more than their actual parents. That could have been a different enough angle to go with. That would have been actually a pretty thought provoking concept. That could have maybe worked. Maybe Ava could be like, "Oh, I had this plan to get rid of your parents, and I'm going to trap you here because you're my kids." Blah blah blah, and it could have been kind of creepy in that way.
Yeah, because they brought up this accident thing that happened. I'm like, that sounds like a very important plot point, but it's like a side note. Like they don't actually focus on it. So here's this comparison. He says, I mean, not shockingly, Smart House is clearly winning here, but it's actually interesting how much they have in common. They both focus on the emotional aspect of the idea and the family connection. They probably have the same amount of horror, to be honest, lol. But yeah, Smart House has more to flesh it out, and it feels more focused. Helps flip a bit too much on what it wants to be, which does hurt it despite the highs. Help is good and a noble attempt, but Smart House remains superior. So he picks Smart House.
All right. Micah, I know you didn't get too far into Smart House. So you probably can't speak on this, but if you had to pick one, just off like I guess the first few minutes, what it got you hooked more? Do you prefer Smart House or do you prefer Help?
I mean, probably Smart House, just because it has that deeper story and the kind of more convincing emotional moments, and just kind of just that whole storyline of like a kid who lost his mom and is kind of so like focused on the in grief that he can't really accept any other new parent, which is kind of cliche, but still has that emotional moment to it. And like, I'm very, especially for me, because like I'm very close with my mom. I can't imagine what would have happened. What would how I can't talk. I can't imagine how I would be affected if I lost her. It's, obviously, that's like the sad thing about it is you're going to lose them at some point. So it's just kind of the idea of losing them so early on in your life when you're still kind of in your formative years and real so reliant on your parents. That's just such a like a deep and like scary concept that I just feel like it's just so much more effective and emotional.
Hmm. And I think that kind of serves to BD's point earlier about Ben. Like you may not like every decision he makes, but you totally empathize and understand his perspective because he wants his childhood but he also wants to be there for his family and be there in the way that his mom is for his was for his family. But he realizes he's just a kid and he can't do it all. So he does these things impulsively and selfishly, not only to help him out, but he's doing this to try to keep his family dynamic intact, which, like I said, it makes you think a little bit, and it's totally relatable. And I could totally see myself kind of lashing out like Ben does in Smart House if I was put in that situation. So yeah, great points, Micah. BD, which one do you prefer?
Let's say Darman or DCOM. What do we pick? Yeah, DCOM. The one positive about DCOMs, and this is in my opinion, what makes DCOM movies to me so good. I mean, I have a real nostalgic love for DCOMs. The reason why DCOM movies I think resonate with so many people is no matter how crazy the plot is, the movie will always take the time to flesh out a relatable story. Like it doesn't matter if you watch Sky High, doesn't matter if you watch 13th Year, Smart House, Halloween Town. No matter how absurd the story is, no matter how crazy or zany the actions or stuff is, the underlying tone of the movie, the actors, the moral of the story is relatable to all of us in any type of way. So I think that the beauty of this movie, Smart House and DComs, is like you're going to attach yourself to the movie. It may not be the best movie ever. The quality might be, pretty low, all things considered. And all things considered, Smart House is not aged well. But you will relate to it. The moral never changes. You're always going to relate to this movie. You may have not lost your mom, but we've all dealt with loss in some sort of way. And we can all imagine, for the most part, if we lost our mom, how would we feel? If you were a person who loved somebody and you lost them, like your wife and kids, you can understand how that would feel. So I think that overall, the DComs are timeless because of that. Meanwhile, Creeped Out's episode is forgettable because it doesn't really go for any moral. It doesn't really go for any heavy hitting buildup. So it's going to escape most people's minds. So I give it to Smart House.
Yeah, and I think for me, there's two facets of why I think this is better than the other, and I'm picking Smart House. But first and foremost, back to the whole point about the moral and the message of the story. For me, I personally resonate with Smart House's message more so than the sad reality that I personally feel about Help's message. Help kind of just shows how far removed society has become since I was a kid. And, this is a hot topic these days, but, when I grew up, we actually went outside and hung out with our friends. We actually had human interaction, blah, blah, blah. But that's honestly the message of the story in that millennial Y2K way. But I think that's why Smart House actually holds up better. And honestly, I think it's more relevant than Help, or I think the message should be more relevant than Help because people kind of forget that at the end of the day. And Help is that sad reality that most families probably are in these days. Most millennials now are parents, and they grew up with the idea of Smart House thinking it was the coolest thing ever. They have kids with smart technology, but now they're going through this whole ordeal with seeing their kids becoming obsessed with technology and treating their iPads and their Alexas like they're members of the family and they're integral to their day-to-day lives. Like, it's sad to see that that's a thing, but there's so many more kids out there these days, living on their phones, not talking with friends, and spending all their free time at home, not bonding with people, and it's what it is. The kids in the story of Help, they have no friends, and Crispin, he realizes this, and it's like, hey, I actually have to hang out with people. He gets the idea, but that's the hurdle of the story for these modern kids and these modern shows. Like, hey, you actually have to put yourself out there. You have to promise the world to some people, and unfortunately, you have to put your reputation and your ego on the stakes sometimes. And when people see that you don't pull through, I'm sure that Crispin, in the events that transpired off screen after the events of the episode, probably caught a lot of heat from his peers at school and realized that, hey, you try to put yourself out there, you fail, but you don't go retreat back in your turtle shell and you don't go, just live off of AI. At least he's walked away from it or willing to take a break from it with his family. But I resonate more with Smart House's message, and I think that should be heard more than what Help was trying to say. And the second thing that I think is better overall is just if you look at the concept of Smart House, it's a way cooler house. It's more escapism. It's more entertaining. There's more to ponder, and honestly, I really do appreciate Smart House being more ahead of its time. As in Help, it tries to blend in and be more realistic with the time it was made in, but it's not it's not in it's not trying to be over the top or escapism. It's trying to be more grounded, and in doing so, there's potential there to be relevant, but it just doesn't capitalize on it. You know what I mean? I'd rather look at Smart House with the long mechanical arms and the hologram walls and playing video games on a wall. That's just cool to me. It oozes coolness, and Help isn't cool. So I don't know. And also, the whole thing about Ben's arc is way better than Crispin's, and we can go on and on about that. Smart House is just a better product for this type of idea. So Smart House wins for me. And I think we, as the panelists, decide that Smart House is the victor here. Decom beats Creeped Out in this scenario. So, with that being said, if we're going to have a discussion tonight, we can keep it very short. AI horror, right? AI horror, you know, it there's a lot more of it these days. You can kind of tie it to smartphone being used and stuff that you see and Creeped Out all the time, like Marty, or there's an episode called Troll that deal with like social media and stuff like that. Haunting Hour has it with certain things like Wrong Number and social media dealing with smartphones and all that. And then you have these '90s books that deal with it, like Killer Computer, which was way ahead of its time, kind of like Smart House. So when it comes to AI horror, BD, I think you kind of alluded to this early on about Zippy actually being a threat and actually using parts of the house in a house, a normal house environment against the families and making it more sinister and more frightening. To you, for AI horror, what's the secret sauce? Is it just having the cool concept, or is it not necessarily the concept, but actually doing something memorable with it? You know what I mean?
I think the key for me in terms of AI horror, because honestly, I wouldn't even use Smart House in the AI horror discussion, in my opinion, because to me, the thing about Smart House, the reason why it's such a popular movie is not really the AI concept. It's the rule of, I call this the rule of Deadpool. Because for any of you who've seen the Deadpool movies, Ryan Reynolds' number one thing he always says is, yeah, it's a Deadpool movie, but it's a different type of movie. So like the first Deadpool movie, he said, oh, it's a romance movie. And you're like, romance movie? Then you watch Deadpool 1 and you're like, oh yeah, it's actually underlying a romance movie just enhanced by the Deadpool story. The second Deadpool movie, it's a family movie. You watch the movie, yeah, it's a weird family movie enhanced by it. Deadpool 3, it's a friendship movie. Smart House is a family movie. It's enhanced by the AI stuff, but it's not an AI focused story. It's really just, at the end of the day, it's about the family dynamic, and the house just enhances it and makes it more interesting. But if you read Killer Computer, if you watch The Tale of the Curious Camera, if you read Don't Scream, if you experience actual AI horror, the key to it, in my opinion, is threat level. Threat level is always the number one thing that makes AI horror really scary. Look at Megan. For all of you who've seen Megan, for all of you who are going to see the sequel, which, by the way, it has the actress from The Boys who plays Miss Newman. Beautiful. I'm watching Megan just for that. She's gorgeous. But all that stuff is threat level, because at the end of the day, AI is intangible. You cannot see it. You cannot imagine it. There's no physical form to it a lot of the time. So it's up to the writers to use it in a very creative and good way. If you look at Zippy, Zippy is a creepy Cuphead kind of villain. He's this cartoon face with a smile. He's got button eyes, and he'll pop up on your computer with these large flashing epileptic LED lights, and he'll be like, please play with me. I want to play a game with you. And when you don't play with him, he'll be like, I don't like you. And there's a scene in the book where she's typing a paper and he starts crashing out. He takes over her keyboard and starts typing nonstop. I hate you. I hate your family. I'm going to kill every one of you. I'm going to delete all of you. I hate every single one of you for how you treated me. It's like a dude snapping on his girlfriend. Like it's crazy. And that's when you realize, oh, he's unstable. And then you see the stuff he does to people. The mom has her hand in a garbage disposal, and the main character realizes this intrusive thought that what if Zippy does something to my mom right now? She gets this bad omen, and she yells at her mom to take out her hand. The mom takes out the hand literally seconds before that garbage disposal turns on, and it's described that her mother's hand would have turned into hamburger meat. When you visualize that, you're like, oh shit, this guy's a threat. You see him start exploding light bulbs. You see him start exploding TV screens. You see him start electrocuting people who touch the doorknobs. You see him start manipulating the power lines. And there's actually a really creepy scene in Killer Computer. This is my favorite scene in the book, where all the characters are gathered up and they basically trap Zippy in the computer and they're trying to figure out how to delete him. And he's talking to them, being like, guys, please forgive me. Please play with me. And then he glitches. And they're like, what the hell was that? And then he'll be like, guys, please, I changed my ways. And he'll glitch again. And then they realize that this little mother effer is trying to move his way through the phone lines. So he's literally trying to play like a puppy, like trying to be real cute. Guys, I changed. I'm different. And meanwhile, he's trying to glitch his way into the phone line so he can kill all the people in the house. That's genuine threat level. If you imagine yourself in that situation, you will get scared. You will get freaked out. If you watch Curious Camera, it's an electropath that you cannot defeat. If you break the TV, it's going to move into your computer. If you break the computer, it's going to go into your TV and it's going to try hurting you in many different ways. If you look at Don't Scream, remember that scene with his little sibling getting like almost electrocuted, like getting burned? Did you remember the scene from Don't Scream where his backpack lights on fire while he's at school? That stuff is really scary. That stuff will unnerve you. And that's what makes it threatening. That's why help doesn't work, because help, there's no threat level. The AI is trying to be friendly and kind, and you don't take it seriously. Meanwhile, if you read these books, if you watch these episodes, you're going to be like, yeah, electropaths arguably are some of the scariest villains ever because they're undefeatable. They are completely malleable. They can go anywhere, anytime, and their influence is tremendous. And what makes them scary is they have subtle horror. You don't need a big scary monster. You don't need a werewolf ripping your dad to shreds. No, you just need your hand going in the garbage disposal at the right time, or actually the wrong time in this case. You putting down your hand into any electrical socket, being near any object, and you could potentially die and get electrocuted. That's the beauty of AI horror, at least in my opinion.
Fantastic, fantastic points. Micah, do you have anything you want to add on to that before I chime in?
Well, I think another effective example of AI horror, and I know a lot of people don't like this movie, but the 2019 Child's Play remake, I think, is another pretty solid example of that, where obviously AI Mark Hamill Chucky will never beat Voodoo Brad Dourif Chucky, but, just the concept of Chucky in the remake, how he's this AI that basically learns and adapts from things. And he starts off as this very innocent, friendly, just this guy who just AI who just wants to be a friend to Andy and just wants to help him in any way he can. And slowly throughout the movie, he starts to turn because of this faulty AI program that he has. It starts kind of minor with him seeing Andy get scratched by a cat and he kills the cat as like a way to almost like very innocently doing it as a way to like he not realizing that this is a bad thing he's doing and doing it as a way to try and help Andy and eliminate something that makes Andy feel bad. And things just keep escalating where he goes and kills the mom's boyfriend after he sees him yelling at Andy. He goes and he like does all this other stuff, where he sees all of Andy and his friends watching the second Texas Chainsaw Massacre and sees them kind of laughing and having this kind of sick enjoyment out of all this carnage, and then takes a knife and goes and starts acting like he's going to kill them and like almost like acting like, oh, this is something they enjoy. This is something that they like. So I'm going to do this, not realizing that what he's doing can have serious side effects and consequences. And that's just something that kind of, I don't know, that creeps me out almost more than like just a general evil and sinister AI, which he does eventually become in the third act. But is almost this AI who is doing horrible and terrifying and evil things under the guise and not realizing that they're doing anything bad. It's just that, just I don't know. That's just so creepy to me. It's just the idea of like they think what they're doing is good and what they're helping people, but in reality, they could be seriously fucking up your life.
Hmm.
And even just off a brief point, like if you this movie is not good, but if you've seen Fast and Furious 8, the one of the best scenes in the movie is the scene with all the electrical push to start vehicles getting hijacked, and you got this giant car crash scene. You got vehicles getting sent out of parking garages and just crashing down on top of cars. And again, that just proves like as the years go on, everything can be controlled by an electropath. Like you are not safe anywhere unless you go into like a log cabin in Minnesota with like no gadgets. It's the only real way you're safe.
Hmm.
Like,
And
and especially like, oh, what are you gonna say?
yeah, go ahead, man.
Oh, like especially like nowadays with like how modern AI is being used, like all these companies are starting to implement AI to replace humans in a lot of jobs and stuff. And like honestly, that's like the more real version of AI horror is just the idea of someday you may become obsolete and that this AI will completely take over everything and that human work will eventually just kind of, I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen, but seeing just kind of how it's being implemented nowadays sparks those fears in your mind of like, what if someday, the job I have, I'm not going to be needed for, and there's just going to be a machine that takes over my job. And it's like, I don't know. That's just more, especially as someone who's like an artist like me, who's looking into go into like like a graphic design industry, and just seeing how all these studios are implementing AI to make posters and make all this other stuff, and it's just like, you know, what in some ways it almost makes you question why you're doing any of that, you're pursuing any of this stuff because like
I think AI got his camera. He got glitched.
Yeah, I think AI got your
no,
camera, man.
AI got your camera, bro. Hey, yo, they didn't want you talking shit. They're like, oh yeah, yeah, you're about to get hijacked.
It's
Yo,
spying
if he
on
got hijacked, it's only a matter of time before AI gets me and completionist kissing. About to replicate that scene, get it all over the internet. It's over for us. We're done.
No, but to chime in, AI, one of the most overlooked things I think kind of echo this sentiment that we've all been talking about. It's a film by Joe Dante. It's called Small Soldiers. And the concept, not necessarily is an electropath, but it's the idea of a microprocessing chip by the government in this case that ends up being bought by these two buffoons designing toys to bring to the masses, to market to kids, and to make a lot of money. But they didn't look into the research of the chips, and these chips essentially create AI artificial beings that can communicate with each other and learn from their stimulus. So as they do things or horrible things or whatever, they improve their thought and they gain more knowledge as they go. So what makes that movie stick out to me in AI horror is you get a mildly different take on it because they're not necessarily possessing gadgets or causing things to go on fire. No, they're just animate beings in plastic figurines, but they're running around building contraptions. Like they're taking lawnmowers and making them like pretty much cars, and they're driving around with lawnmower blades, cutting your legs up if they wanted to. They're taking kerosene, lighting socks, and making like giant flaming cannonballs to shoot through your windows and stuff like that. They're making makeshift weapons out of kitchen knives and stuff like that. That's still the same idea. AI, they can learn from the stimulus and they can adapt and move on. And then, like BD brought up, you have the Emmys and the Zippies in kids horror, where you have electropathic beings that can move through different various technologies that you can't get rid of. And because they're so threatening, it makes the kid's situation that much more harrowing because they get desperate. Almost always in these type of stories, the ones that really do stick out. And I have to say, Don't Scream is one of my personal favorite Goosebumps books. It's not the best, but I love the crap out of that book. And Killer Computer is one of my top 5 favorite kids' horror stories of all time. And it's literally based on the idea of making these kids feel peril and feeling the stakes from these villains. Smart House and Help, right? You can put them in the similar category of AI horror, but what they miss, what they're going for, is not what works in stuff like Small Soldiers or the Child's Play remake or Megan, Killer Computer, Don't Scream. The list goes on. They try to operate in this family-friendly environment where they treat the AI like a family member, and the intentions of the AI are altruistic. It's not out of evil or doing something because they are inherently evil, or because they learn that humanity is a sickness, or that they're, I guess, superior than humanity. No, it's it's literally because uh, they are taught these things, and the humans teach them like, no, you're supposed to be good, and they're like, oh yeah, I forgot. I'm sorry. Let's hug it out. You know, that's the opposite of what we look for in this stuff. Which is, I guess, fitting why we compared these two together, because they're really the only two that I think within the kids horror subgenre kind of fall into this. You can even look at things like Not Near Mint from Haunting Hour, with like a cybernetic, teddy bear that may or may not be like actually going around, kind of in that slappy doll kind of way. But even then, it's technology implied, right?
There's
And the
also
list goes
the
on and on.
there's also the Disney XD show sitcom Lab Rats, which is about androids, like a guy having 3 android siblings. So you
Mhm.
got that too.
Well,
Yeah,
they're
I
not
mean,
androids. I think aren't they like biotic humans? I think.
Oh, maybe biotic humans.
Yeah.
I guess
I mean,
androids.
still the same kind of idea, like the
Same thing.
bionic
Yeah.
chip and stuff.
Yeah, same thing.
but yeah, like Smart House and Help kind of fall on that, non-threat level, to the point where they both don't really feel like horror. They feel like pseudo kids horror. Like you can see, you can feel the psychological aspect going on, but that's about it. You know what I mean? There's no overt horror to be had. And if you find that stuff superior, more power to you. But you get that same level of psychological in these more graphic ones, like Don't Scream, like Megan. The list goes on. And I just think that this is why, when we were talking about Help, if it would have just picked a lane and made Ava threatening, like a Zippy, like an Emmy, it could have stood out for Creeped Out. Yeah, it could have been very similar in how those other two stories played out, but hey, it works, right? And this is one of those things that, over time, if more stories come out, I can definitely see people start to say, hey, this is kind of ripping off Killer Computer or Don't Scream. But I'd rather take that and just have solid stories than something that tries to be something that's not really horror to begin with. In the case of Help, trying to be more like Smart House, I'm fine with the whole house being the villain and having the whole house be a part of this whole thing. But do it a little bit better. You know what I mean? That's why, I think if there was a third attempt at this, and maybe a future down the pipeline show or kids horror anthology show wants to tackle a similar idea and wants to put their own spin on it, I welcome it, because there's a lot of potential. We just haven't seen the potential with the Smart House idea yet. So
There are some valiant attempts. Like I know there's some short horror films out there. There's one that I saw where it was actually about a serial killer or burglar, some like serial killer that was breaking into a guy's house, and his Alexa system starts betraying him. Like when he says lock the doors, she unlocks it and lets the serial killer in. So you could also do that where like maybe you have a monster in the story. The kids are trying to protect themselves, and next thing you know, the software starts actually going against you. It starts unlocking the windows, starts unlocking the doors. The monster or person gets in, and now you got 2 threats against you. So there's a lot of ideas.
well, yeah, I think that wraps up our episode 29. Yeah, we had a lot to say there, but we're glad if you stuck around this whole podcast, listened and watched, or one or the other. We really appreciate you for doing so. And for our next episode, this is going to round out season 2. We do 15 episode seasons, and we come back and do a special every once in a while. We will be back after episode 30 sometime in October to do maybe one or two specials. But for now, the next one will be our last one for a few months, and then we'll get back on the normal schedule of recording. But we decided to do something that we haven't really done before, but we want to start doing more of, and we just want to compare a book to an episode and see how that works. We don't have to do multiple things, piled on. And we decided to do a back to school themed one here. And this one, if you know about it, you definitely understand why we're facing these two off. We have decided to pick a classic original 62 Goosebumps book called The Haunted School. And we're going to be facing it off against a season 7 episode from Are You Afraid of the Dark called The Tale of the Photo Finish. So, which one is going to win? You got to check out next episode to find out. Please, if you're not subscribed to me, go ahead and drop a sub if you'd like, drop a like on this podcast video, and please check out all former Goosejunkies podcasts we have done. There is a playlist on this channel for you to do so at your own leisure. And I'll also provide links to the other fellow panelists, Spongy444, BD, who goes by the Horrorlander, and Micah, who goes by the Ultimate Goosebumps Man. I will put all their social links and where you can find them in the description and the comment section of this video. So please go give them a lot of support and show them some love. Check out some of their stuff. Please help Micah and BD both get to 1,000 subs. That's my next goal for them, is to help them get where, closer to where I'm at, and I think they deserve every bit of it. I feel blessed that I have the subscriber count I do, but if I only got, 3 times of you to go give them support as you do me, that would tickle me. And if you don't want to do it for them, do it for me, y'all, because these guys are awesome. So until next time, y'all, it's been real, and we hope to see you there. And let us know down in the comment section, above all else, before we get off, which one do you prefer? If you've seen both, do you like Smart House more? Do you like Help more? We want to know. And take care and have a great night, y'all.
Deuces.